It was interesting. You brought up this idea of the magazine as a business card, and then you carried it. And in some way, it was kind of implied in all of the talks. And I wonder, I guess when I hear that, I think if you're going to launch a magazine, you better have some other plans, right? Like this can't be a standalone thing, is what I hear. Is that right? Is that true? You want to tackle that first, since you brought up that line?
Yeah. Actually, I think it's because we're a much younger magazine. This is an idea that we've developed along the way, that the magazine was a platform for collaboration, very much so. And so it was a platform, it was a way for us to meet with our community and collaborate with our community. And also, it was a good excuse to have people meet, you know, around events and such. So I think business-wise, it's impossible to make a living out of just making the magazine. But as I said earlier, the magazine is the best way to define your vision. And
so is that true? Caroline,
I think you used to be able to make a lot of money just by having magazines. I think that's how Condé Nast became a multi-billion-dollar dynasty. But I think today, where we are, you know, if we were, and we actually want to launch another print magazine, but with that in mind, you have to start thinking about all your other revenue models, product, you know, white label content, experiences, conferences, things that just surround the magazine itself. I think today, in this day and age, if you're to launch a magazine, I don't think you should necessarily think, I want to do X, Y, Z as well, but you definitely need to have an idea of how you're going to bring enough revenue in order to keep it going.
Is it, you all brought up this idea of niche as well, you know, being truly unique, but also focusing on smaller audiences that are really, really engaged. I'm kind of curious, how niche can you go there? Can you push that really far, or is that...
Absolutely. I think even beside just seeing that, it's so specific, but it's also quite, you know, even though I'm the worst outdoors person, bad Canadian, but I would definitely be interested in looking at that because it's a beautifully made magazine. It's interesting. But absolutely, I think sometimes actually the more niche you get today, the better it is because you have a very, very, it's the same thing as having analytics on your Instagram. You know exactly who you're targeting, and the brands who want to work with you want to get to that audience.
Caroline, do you find in the context of C2, like, do you think of that as a kind of a niche publication?
Well, it's very niche in the sense that it's really targeted at people who were at the event.
And to me, that's as slim as it gets, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even within the people, I mean, among the people who are there, it's still like 47 industries. So, that's interesting because I can't remember who it was, but someone said, okay, well, you go niche, but you need to be broad. That kind of fulfills that, right? You are talking to a really small slice, but you're really covering a lot of ground. Really. Yeah, it's a what, sorry? It's a carrot.
It's a carrot, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, when in mining, when you kind of go find a carrot to see what all the stratas and of sediments are in the ground.
Did everyone get that? That's awesome.
Mining reference?
I'm with you, don't worry.
Okay.
Maybe I would just add that being niche is also your concept it's also making your concept really clear to your audience, and so it's a valid point for a podcast as much as an event, or people need to know what they're expecting, but from there you can take them really far. And in the end, while we're always talking about nature and outdoors and asking ethical questions about the environment, what we're really telling is the stories of people, and those stories are quite inspiring. And I think that the environment is something we really believe in, but it's also an excuse to bring forth really interesting ideas and interesting stories. Yeah.
I like the way that you put that, and I also feel like when I look at all of the layouts that I saw on screen, it kind of feels like, you know, that medium is special enough to tell these stories in a way that, I don't know, people can engage with in a very special way.
from a fashion industry point of view, until the day that creative directors still don't tear out pages and put them on their mood boards, I think print will always have a place. And I think print allows you, and this is why, the minutes make so much sense, and having a place for those stories for the outdoors. There is something irreplaceable about print, and there is something collectible about print. And I think collectability is probably a word I haven't used yet, which I should have. But collectible, substantial pieces of content in printed form, I think, are the things that will last and will continue to last.
I would just add that I think a print magazine is sort of a curated experience where we're taking you through various contents, and there's a progression to that. And the other thing is that it's a very personal experience, and it's a tactile experience as well. And there's this extra step with print that you are going through your magazine as your own personal experience, which with the web is not as defined. There are templates, and we're always going through the screen. So I think there's also beauty in print. And as I said earlier, just having a full offline experience is so enjoyable these days.
So that makes me think of like editorial strategy. You all brought up this idea of content. We hear it all the time. And even like, at small micro levels, everyone blogs, everyone gets content out. And I wonder, as much as content is king, is the editorial strategy really the thing that kind of drives that home? In other words, maybe this is a quantity over quality question, but do you need an editorial strategy even personally or as a brand? Is that a necessity to be able to get stuff out?
Yes, absolutely. I think the only thing that engages now is a point of view, which is the equivalent of an editorial strategy, whether that's a personal Instagram feed, a blog, or a printed magazine. But people flock towards a very specific point of view, and if you can actually communicate that in a way that engages, then that's absolutely critical.
So if you come from a publishing background, I see you kind of can start from that. But when I think about brands, either more traditional brands or retail, like things that don't start from an editorial point of view, but want to create content or get into this world, does that mean that every brand now needs an editorial strategy? You need an editor-in-chief? This is kind of table stakes now?
Well, that's where everybody's going. I don't know whether it's needed, but for a brand like Hugo Boss, for example, who recently relaunched e-commerce, and they've actually started thinking, well, what is our content strategy? How are we relating? How much do we talk about fashion trends that have nothing to do with the stuff we're actually selling versus how much editorial do we put against the stuff we have to sell? And that's still a debate that so many brands are going through. How much kind of other stuff that talks about the brand itself versus sell. And it's still a question as to what that balance is. For every brand, it's different.
Caroline, I'm kind of curious. In the context of C2, does the editorial strategy, how does that tension play with the strategy of conference programming and stuff? Do you feel like you have freedom in editorial strategy? Or are you kind of piggybacking the conference?
It's a really good question, and I'm not really sure what the answer is. Content, what is content? Really, but really, I'm asking myself that question all the time because it's very organic the way it's done at C2. There's programming, there's me, there's sales, partnerships. Marketing communications are kind of organic, so I tend to lead the editorial storytelling of the brand. But then with marketing objectives, which I'm not responsible for. So and then there's social, which is not content, right? So the answer is I have no idea what the answer is.
And yet you rewrote a bunch of stuff, obviously to capture a point of view. Well, those are not my words. But I mean, like, there's a strategy obviously that takes precedence there. You say I want to fulfill a vision here, and I want to be able to do that in the right way. So it seems to me like, the editorial foundation or the editorial strategy seems to be such an important foundation there.
Well, it is for me, and that's kind of what I'm. That's what naturally I'm implementing because I believe in it. I believe there's a story there, and I think a big part of our product is content. It's the experience, but it's also all that stuff that people are talking about over the course of 3 days. So how do we turn that into something that transcends the event?
Nice, I like that. Any questions? I'm kind of curious about tools, like how you bridge the gap, right? You're distributing content now. Obviously, you said the future of print is web, mobile, AR, VR, all of these other things. What tools or strategies do you use to kind of bridge publishing print and publishing in all these other channels here to keep that? Maybe I'm kind of curious, Catherine, because you alluded to things that are coming. Let's say things you're going to keep secret, but
well, that's why we're in really the early stages of that, and it's funny because we're currently asking ourselves. It's very clear to us the way we can apply our approach in Beside to events and workshops and even some mentoring with outdoor organizations. But the one thing that's the hardest for us right now is to think, what are we going to do with social media? Is social media just us, sending promotions and just putting, small bits of content that we're going to have in the magazine? Or is our social media a media in itself? And is it also a way to tell stories and bring content and news and stuff? So that's a reflection we're having right now, and we're not quite sure. We're kind of taking it slow. Yeah.
I mean, 19 years, and we literally just hired a social media manager.
Right. It's funny, you talked about getting some things in too early and some things in too late. It's a really interesting strategy.
Good point, Alex.
Right.
But I think that's part of the charm of Tank, yes. But it's a tough one, and I think whether you're on issue 2 or 19 years later, I think it's a question. What do you put out there? But for us, it's always about how do you create the Tank world. We have a very specific point of view, and our social media needs to reflect that. But I think it got so out of you need to have somebody full-time really thinking about that, and we just figured that out.
And to you, Caroline, social is not, I don't know what you said, social is not a channel, or social is not content, in your mind.
I think it is. We work with a team who's not physically in Montreal. It's Tara Hunt in Toronto with her team. And I don't know, I don't know how it's supposed to work, but I'm sure there's a way to do it better, because the voice of C2, I think, is developing. And I think you need somebody internally. Somebody needs to be there, to kind of get the vibe of what's happening.
Live and breathe the brand.
Exactly. And I think you can have wonderful ideas for content and channels and promotions, but if you're not physically there, you don't hear that sentence that Alexa would have said there that really makes sense within the context of the brand. I don't know. You don't pick up on the chatter, which is a little bit unfortunate. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's one good way to do it. There always seems to be some kind of compromise.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of this thing that you said earlier, which is like this print forces you to be truly unique, and that's kind of if there's one constraint here that allows you to flourish, it seems like that's really coming true here, which is nice to see. Any questions from the parents? Parents in the room? Yes.
Diane definitely has a question.
Okay.
Okay, I want to know, where does the title of your magazine, Beside, where does that come from?
But actually, you could ask the person sitting next to you, because he's the founder of Beside, and he picked the name.
Whoa, look at that. Good choice. Do you want to pass that mic to your left?
Sorry?
Pass the mic to your left. Yeah. Why is it called? Why is it?
Well, I don't like to be on the hot seat, but thanks, Catherine.
That was good.
Yeah.
Beside has two meanings. First of all, we needed a name that could travel all over the world. So the first one was Un Pied Donné at the biggest outdoor magazine, which is called Outside. So we don't want to tell anyone to go outside. We want to inspire people to do so. And the second thing is the B-side, because this is the flip side of the music record. On the B side, there's always the best music that nobody wants to talk about. And that's the same thing about the outdoor, I would say, stories that we're talking about. This is what everybody else don't talk about.
Cool. Nice. Your mom has another question?
That's a pity question.
Where does the
Why is it
tank
called
come
tank?
from?
Why is it called C2?
Okay. Tank was named mostly because it looks great. It's a 4-letter word. It's solid. It reminds you of a think tank and tank girl. Why not? Absolutely. There you go. You can extrapolate from it what you want.
Good question.
That's it.
Cool. Anyone else? This has been super fun, and thank you very much for 3 wonderful presentations. I'll see you on the riverbank May 13th.
Oh, great.
And thanks so much for coming. Grab a drink. Thank you.